Good. All right. Well, welcome. Thank you for being here for the last of today's Earth Day events. Though we have others that should be in a sheet on the back of the room. I believe on Friday, and if I'm not mistaken, Saturday. There's a Saturday event as well. This event is titled Long Island Clean Energy, a partnership with Hofstra. My name is Phil Dalton. I am the director of our Center for Civic Engagement here at Hofstra. I'm also a professor of rhetoric and public advocacy. The Center for Civic Engagement it's a center that focuses on educating folks for the purpose of being more involved democratically in fostering public discussion and partnering with the local community. Which is what brings us here today. We're doing our best to bring issues to students, also the community, about environmental issues. I'd want to acknowledge the Hofstra Cultural Center and Carol back there, who's done so much to help us today. And also the CCE Fellows. The Center for Civic Engagement has undergraduate fellows who work with the center, working with community partners, doing work in the community, like helping them with various projects as we do forms of outreach. We also have two great graduate assistants, Joanna Lastor-Montez and Sarah Kemaradine, who's here with us right now. So I want to thank you all for the work you've put into this. This event, and correct me where my facts are wrong, is about a $4 million NYSERDA grant that several entities applied for in cooperation with each other. NYSERDA is the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. The Cornell Cooperative Extension will lead the effort to ensure clean energy investments are made in all Long Island communities, regardless of income or who lives there. And this will be done in cooperation with Hofstra, the United Way of Long Island, Renewable Energy of Long Island, Molloy University, and Farmingdale State College. And like you, I am here to learn more about the projects being planned. To talk about the grant, we're very lucky to have with us today three distinguished guests who will speak in the order of introduction. We have with us Larry Levy, the Executive Dean of the National Center for Suburban Studies here at Hofstra. Dr. J. Brett Bennington, Department Chair of Geology, Environment, and Sustainability, among the many other hats he wears. He is also a member of CCE's advisory board. And Michael Fiorentino, who is the Natural Resources Program Director for the Cornell Cooperative Extension in Nassau County. He is also the co-director of the Long Island Clean Energy Hub. So when the speakers are done, I'll ask a few questions, but also encourage you to think of questions you might ask. Please come to the mic when we're done and put your questions to our guests. So anyway, please warmly welcome our first speaker, Larry Levy.
Thank you. I applaud you for your applause and your participation. Sustainability, which is a word that means a lot of things to a lot of people, is in all the definitions extremely important and is becoming much, much, much more so in terms of not just the environment, but our economy and any number of other things. And if you master sustainability studies, and I think Dr. Bennington said that most of the students here are involved in one way, you will be prepared to participate in any industry, any community, within any organization. And it's a wonderful, better than law school, better than an MBA in terms of having a fulfilling and enriching future. So I just wanted to throw that out. This presentation overall is to talk about the Long Island Regional Clean Energy Hub. My role for really 5 or 6 minutes is to put it into a social, economic, and racial context. Because stripped of all the fancy language about underserved communities and underinvested neighborhoods is the reality that communities and people of color tend to get left out of the benefits of almost any development that advances the economy in general. And one of the things that the state, and occasionally they get it right, in its wisdom, is to make sure that with all the billions of dollars being invested in clean energy projects, particularly on and offshore of Long Island, that we don't wait for it to magically trickle down to communities that are isolated from the economic, social mainstream, but to make sure that it gets there with some real intentionality and the participation of a lot of organizations. So you hear words like white privilege and institutional and systemic racism, and there are some in the population who tend to poo-poo them as jargon and as pushing a political agenda. But the reality is that there are enormous disparities that this project is both confronting and hopes to some degree ameliorate. I'll just give you a few examples that I've encountered. I worked at Newsday for 30 years, 7 months, and 14 days. Who's counting, right? And I ended up as the chief political columnist and senior editorial writer, and I've been at Hofstra now for 16 years. Don't do the math. I mean, in those years as a reporter, as a columnist, as a researcher, we've stumbled across any number of examples of the kind of things I'm talking about. And I'll just get into a few more because the time is ticking away quickly. The center did a study 5 years ago on inequities, disparities in minority teacher hiring. And we found that in 61% of the 600 plus public school buildings on Long Island, 61% did not have a single black teacher. Now, if you had told me this was a suburb of Montgomery, Alabama, I'd say, yeah, okay, it's the vestiges of Jim Crow and other issues of Southern segregation. But this is here on Long Island and a supposedly moderate northern region. And that's 61% in a community where 48%, of the buildings didn't have a Latino teacher, and high 20s, I think, did not have an Asian teacher, of any Asian, of the 80 Asian groups that tend to be put in that category. And yet we have a region that may have been maybe 5 or 7% non-white when my parents moved out here in the 50s, but now we are approaching a majority minority population, yet only 8% of the teachers are non-white. We see examples in the economy where the disparities between the income levels of whites and non-whites, particularly blacks and Latinos, are significant. I'm not going to throw up a lot of statistics on the board. You can find this out very, very simply if you're interested in going further. And we see this everywhere. And I'm just going to finish up with one segue that's more germane to this overall program. When it comes to what we call, what you know to be, if you've been studying sustainability and sociology, is environmental racism, environmental injustice. In most of according to the work research we did for the Long Island Regional Economic Development Council, the vast majority of communities that are struggling with pollution at a level where they are designated Superfund or nearly so are in communities of color. And I'll throw in one other statistic too that I left out when I was talking about education. 80%, around 80% of Black and Latino students on Long Island attend about 20% of the schools. So we have a situation that underlines all these issues, all these disparities, including, by the way, health disparities, which, I'll stretch my 5 minutes, health disparities, which we saw during the pandemic, where the rates of infections and deaths among Blacks and Latinos all over the country, but especially in New York City and on Long Island, were enormous. The suffering for families and to the microeconomies in these communities. So these are big problems, and what we're trying to do, as I said in the beginning, is to recognize this, confront it, come up with solutions that come from these communities, and Mike will be talking about, what we're planning to do to make sure this isn't the wisdom of us white guys telling the people of color in their communities what they should be doing, but to make sure it's something that is respectful, impactful, and literally moves the dial in terms of energy in making sure that the economic benefits reach all Long Islanders. So I think I'll stop here. I could talk about an hour on each one of those disparities, but we have to move on. So should I introduce Brett? Well, he was already introduced. You know him because he's your teacher. He's been a great partner at the National Center for Suburban Studies, which is a multidisciplinary research organization. I think some of you have worked on some of our projects, on some of the research contracts we have, and the more the merrier. Anyways,
thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. My role here is to just take a few minutes to consider the question, why would residents and homeowners on Long Island care about transitioning to renewable energy? What's in it for us? Why bother? Anybody have any suggestions? Cameron? Yeah, so make sure I use the microphone. So there's an environmental benefit. There's an environmental cost, a degradation that we associate with climate change. And of course, I'm preaching to the choir here, but the reason for transitioning away from fossil fuels, from carbon-based energy to non-carbon renewable energy is primarily to combat the problem of climate change. And climate change, the warming of the climate causes significant environmental degradation. Anybody want to give an example?
2 cookies.
Yeah, you get 2 cookies. So what might happen? If the temperature warms up 3 degrees Celsius, what might happen on Long Island? So sea level rise is a big one, right? We're an island, and we have a lot of people who live very close to sea level. As sea level rises, coastal communities become more prone to storm surge flooding, but they also become more prone to just normal high tides, what they call sunny day flooding. And since we have so much coastline and these highly populated Western Barrier Islands, this is a very big deal. So sea level rise is actually #1 on my list. Good job. What else? What is another environmental impact of climate change that's going to hit us on Long Island? Absolutely. The loss of marine resources, because the traditional marine species that live around Long Island are going to either die off locally or migrate as the water warms. This has already happened with a very important economic species on Long Island, which is no longer really fished for very much. Anybody know what that is? Oysters have died off for probably more for the reasons related to overfishing But there's a secondary environmental impact that probably affects the oysters, which could be related to warming water, and that's the loss of eelgrass beds and places for them to spawn. But there's one sort of poster species. Used to be very abundant in Long Island Sound, and I grew up in Northport, and the boats went out every morning and came back mid-afternoon. I'll give you a hint. We have one living in the hallway of Gittleson. Lobsters, yeah. So the lobster fishery, the Long Island Sound is the southern extent of the range of the North Atlantic lobster. And as the waters have warmed, that population got increasingly prone to disease, and there was a big die-off in the late 90s. And the lobsters have basically shifted northward. And the same thing that happened in Long Island Sound is now starting to happen in Narragansett Bay. On the other hand, up in the Gulf of Maine, the lobster fishery is very healthy because the optimal conditions have moved. And this is, as the ocean warms, this is going to happen to other economic and also recreationally important marine species. And that will degrade economic opportunities on Long Island and also degrade recreational and quality of life opportunities. There's kind of one more big one. Disease. So as the climate warms, southern species migrate north, including insect species, and we have mosquitoes on Long Island now that are invasive, like the Asian tiger mosquito, and if they don't get killed off in the wintertime by cold temperatures, then they can become reservoirs for different diseases like dengue fever, for example. We have a healthy tick population on Long Island, which can become vectors for exotic diseases. So tick-borne diseases, and of course the other major health issue is just heat. Prolonged summer heat waves can be, well, they're uncomfortable for most of us. For some of us, particularly the very young, the very old, and people who can't afford air conditioning, they can be deadly. Heat waves can kill hundreds of thousands of people. So public health is a big issue. And the thing that I'll end on is one that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and that's just the nature of fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are a globally traded commodity that are concentrated in particular parts of the world and are scarce in other parts of the world. And even though in the United States we have access to a lot of fossil fuel, we are now the leading producer and exporter of fossil fuel in the world. We don't produce fossil fuel and then keep it for ourselves. It gets sold on a global market. And, at any given time, the amount of fossil fuel available on the global market is just about as much as the market needs. Because if there's too much fossil fuel, the price drops, and then people stop producing it, and that drives the price back up. And if there's not enough fossil fuel, then the price goes way up, and there's an incentive to produce it. So because of the kind of globalized commodity nature of fossil fuel, it's always kind of balanced sort of precariously. And if something happens like a pandemic or a war, the supply and demand equation becomes disrupted and the price fluctuates wildly. That's not an issue with renewable energy. Renewable energy is produced locally and regionally, right? If you have solar panels on your house, you are making your own electricity. Sort of like having an oil well in a refinery in your backyard. So if we transition to renewable energy, we're going to completely change the geopolitical equation around energy, and I'm pretty confident we'll change it for the better. And we'll be, that'll buffer some of these wild price swings that can really hit people in the pocketbook. I mean, when the price of home heating oil goes sky high, that becomes a real issue for people who, are already struggling with their finances. All right, thank you very much. Let me bring up the main event here, the person we've all come to see, Michael.
Well, thank you, everyone. And I think that Dean Levy and Dr. Bennington did an excellent job, covering the two main issues that we are going to be discussing with this regional clean energy hub. And that's going to be the social equity piece and also the environmental aspects of clean energy also. So to introduce myself, my name is Mike Fiorentino. I'm the Natural Resource Program Leader at Cornell Cooperative Extension of Nassau County. Along with my counterpart, I'm also serving as the co-director for the Long Island Regional Clean Energy Hub. My background is not in energy education. It's not in clean or renewable energy. I've been formally trained in social sciences, like many of you here. So my background and my role in this project is to aid in the development of programs that really meet the needs of the community. Because there's no point in going out and proposing all these solutions if it's not going to be resolving the actual problem here. My colleague, our co-director, Ken Schlather, on this project, he is actually based up in Ithaca, and he has over 20 years of experience within the cooperative extension system and also in the clean energy field, and has contributed immensely to some of the policies and the programs that we see here throughout New York State. So my contact information's up here. We also have an energy advisor hotline for residents or small business owners who have questions about the programs or the incentives to call this number, and one of our energy advisors will be able to respond to their questions here. So just to get us going here today, first we'd like to paint a picture of what our current energy landscape looks like. Then we'll talk about some of the funding opportunities that are available through state and federal sources. We'll talk about some of the steps that we try to work with community members on in order for them to improve the energy efficiency and the health of their home. We'll talk about the role of the Long Island Regional Clean Energy, how we fit into this big picture here, and we'll also talk about the strength in our partnerships, like with Hofstra University. So right off the bat, our current energy infrastructure is not up to par. I don't think that there's anyone that will refute you on this claim, and it's something that we're very well aware of. The Long Island Power Authority has identified a lot of key points and weaknesses within our transmission system. We have a very outdated infrastructure, and certainly not one that has the capacity to handle the influx of renewable energies that we're anticipating through these various offshore wind projects, the solar farms, and the residential solar as well. So first off the bat, we see that we have been experiencing higher utility costs, and this is something that we're seeing in all aspects of our life. The cost of fossil fuels have been increasing. With some of the restrictions on purchasing and importing of fossil fuels, we're seeing a lower demand and increased prices on that side. And we're also seeing increased delivery charges as we work to increase the infrastructure of the energy grid to be able to accommodate these different energy influxes and also the resiliency of this. We're seeing increased storm damage from some of these events that we've been having. We have Superstorm Sandy, where many of our residents went over 2 weeks without power. This is due to, once again, the outdated energy infrastructure, but also we are seeing climate events that we have not seen before. And that is becoming increasingly aware to us, and something that we need to develop innovative solutions to. And then, especially here on Long Island, we're seeing an aging housing stock. A lot of our homes, the average home in New York State is approximately 57 years old. At the time, these houses were developed to be built quickly and efficiently. They were not designed with energy efficiency in mind. So now that's an issue that we have to resolve. We have to start retrofitting older homes. And as we begin to design newer homes, we have to develop them with energy efficiency in mind here. So as we can see from this image here, we can see how New York compares to the rest of the nation as far as our energy consumption. So the largest cost or the draw on our energy system is through home and commercial heating systems. Many of us may have oil or natural gas heating within our homes. Even within those systems, there's the energy required to power the furnaces, the boilers. We may have many areas that are powered by electrical heat. And this is going to be consistent across the nation here. But you can see that New York, being in a colder climate environment, our energy cost for home heating is going to be typically higher than some of the other areas. When we look at the air conditioning, fortunately, we are in a colder environment compared to Texas or some of the other warmer states here. So we don't typically see huge expenses on cooling cost. Even within a lot of our communities here, those that don't have HVAC systems or cooling heat pumps in their homes, we relatively don't use our window air systems, our air conditioning systems relatively often, only on select days throughout the year when the heat is especially high. But the other area to point out here is the home appliances. This will be your refrigeration units, your washers, your dryers, microwave ovens. That's going to be fairly consistent across the board. We are very fortunate here in New York State that we do have a lot of rebates through the Home Energy Star program. So when homeowners are purchasing new appliances, the rebates that are available to them is an additional incentive to purchase a more energy efficient home appliance. If you don't have the resources or the ability to purchase an energy efficient appliance, even if we go with a basic appliance there, it's more likely going to be more energy efficient than it was 10 years ago. So that's why we see some of those trends here in New York State. So in addition to the economic side of it, there's also the health side of it. And when we work with residents and small business owners, we always try to encourage a whole home picture, meaning that we don't want to fix one system and completely ignore another. So in this image here, we can see the different health concerns that could be posed throughout an inadequate home efficiency system here. If we are installing a new heat pump and improving our home heating efficiency, there's no point in investing in that case if you're not improving your home weatherization. If you have drafts coming in through windows or doors, if you have other points of your home where you're losing heat to, that money that you're investing in your heating system is going to go right out the window. Some other areas where we're seeing mold or other abatement issues that need to be resolved, you have to look at the root cause of those problems. And if you're seeing mold or mildew in your homes, that's most likely caused to a moisture buildup, either condensation on windows, vents that are not venting properly and properly removing moisture from the homes. So we want to be able to address all of those issues at once. And even if we don't have the resources or the ability to improve them all at once, we still want to be able to address them all and prioritize them. So that way we can eventually improve the entire efficiency of the home. And cost is often a major barrier for people to make these energy efficiency improvements in their homes. And when you're looking at the cost of some of these improvements, you could be seeing $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. And that's a very intimidating number, especially if you are purchasing a new home or you are living in a low to moderate income household there. But fortunately, there's a lot of incentives and opportunities throughout New York State and other federal sources as well that we're already paying into. So when you look at your home energy bill, you'll see what's called a systems benefit charge. This is sort of like a checkoff. So you're investing money into this fund that you will then reap the benefits of afterwards. So this pool of money goes through the NYSERDA, New York State Energy Research Development Authority, and it funds specific projects throughout the state. Some of those projects could include home efficiency rebates. They can include community campaigns, and it can include other assistance programs also, if there's any emergency relief opportunities as well. And while we're looking at this image here, you can see that the energy bill is broken up into two main categories. And if you look at your PSCG Long Island bill, you'll see this as well. We have the energy supply charges. This is the cost of producing the energy. And then we also have the delivery charges, and that's going to be the cost of delivering the energy to your home. And it may seem a little silly to have that delivery charge since our home is connected to the grid and we already have these transmission lines going into our homes delivering that energy, but it's just like paying our taxes to repair the roads. There's always going to be repairs and upgrades that are needed, and those need to be funded somehow. When we begin working with some homeowners and even some of our small business owners, we try to promote three main technologies here. So the first thing we want to do is we want to improve the efficiency of the home. And New York State has various incentive programs to be able to do that. This is going to be looking at the home weatherization program, improving the efficiency of your windows and doors, improving the insulation in your home, upgrading your appliances. We look at renewable heating systems. The most common is going to be heat pumps, which draw some of the heat from the atmosphere and pump it into your home, even in the wintertime, which is a little bit of a difficult concept for people to understand, how you can take heat from sub-zero temperatures, but it is a technology that we have now and a very efficient source of heat. The heat pumps do draw a little bit of electricity, but once we begin focusing on more renewable energy sources, that, I guess, negative aspect there sort of gets outweighed. And then we always try to promote solar. If a homeowner does not have the ability to install solar on their roof, whether it's not an ideal location, whether they're renting their building, there are opportunities for community solar farms where people pay into these larger scale renewable projects and they still get some of the benefits that are produced from them. Now from this, we have the Long Island Regional Clean Energy Hub. So as was described in the introduction, in September of 2022, Cornell Cooperative Extension of Nassau County was contracted by NYSERDA as the lead contractor for the Long Island Regional Clean Energy Hub. And I don't think there's a way to describe the hub in 5 minutes or less because of the amount of activities that are being conducted through the hub. As the name implies, NYSERDA's intent was to create a one-stop shop for all these other energy programs to be filtered through. We are the community liaison and the communication channel between NYSERDA and these other agencies and the community itself. So looking at this image here, I'll bounce around a little bit and make you dizzy, but starting off with the statewide coordination, we are contracted for the Long Island region. There are 12 other regions across New York State. So right off the bat, we have that strength in this system of other regional hubs that are working together. Those regions are typically broken down by Economic Development Council regions. However, in New York City, due to the sheer quantity of residents that are living in New York City, it's broken down into 3 separate hubs as well. Jumping from there, we go to the community engagement piece. And this is one of the most important pieces because, as I mentioned previously, we don't want to be proposing solutions that are not going to meet the needs of the community. So the first project that we're going to be working on throughout this Regional Clean Energy Hub is what we are calling a Regional Analysis and Barriers Assessment, or we might refer to it as a RABA. And this RABA here is going to first off illustrate what the current energy landscape looks like across Long Island. What does our energy grid look like? What are our residents currently using for the energy sources? And what are some of the restraints that we're seeing for whether people choose to or not to adopt some of these clean energy resources? We will be taking into consideration the feedback of the community. And this is one of the major roles that Hofstra is going to be playing in this, being able to facilitate focus groups, to deliver surveys, to actually get out into the communities, identify who those key individuals are, who are the voices for the community, and bring them into the conversation. So that way they are telling us exactly what they need. They're telling us, what those barriers are for them to adopt or not adopt these energy solutions here. And we'll also be identifying, ideally, candidates for energy advisors. We want to employ people who are from the community, who know the community and can speak to the community. And we also want to develop a stronger network of voices to be able to serve as an advisory committee to this hub throughout the entire 4 years of this project here. Jumping into the energy advisors, we will be employing approximately 8 community energy advisors throughout the region. One of these energy advisors will be based out of Hofstra, I believe at the Center for Civic Engagement. And the role of the energy advisors will be to go out into the community and really walk these residents, hand in hand throughout the process of conducting the home energy audit and then applying for some of these NYSERDA resources. There may be questions, there may be some confusion, there might be things that we need to clarify throughout the application process, and that's what our energy advisors are there to do, to be able to meet someone on a food line at a food pantry and then work with them, build a relationship with them, so that way we're seeing these progress. And once we work with them and they get their heat pump installed, then we're going to work with them and get their home weatherized. We're going to work with them to get their solar installed. It's not a one time and then done. It's us building a relationship with these customers throughout the community there. In addition to working with residents, we are also working with small business owners as well, specifically within the MWBE business arena. Workforce development is another important part. We have some partners who we'll show in the next few slides here that have really been leaders in the clean energy field. Now, when we talk about workforce development, we're looking at two major pieces here. We want to bring awareness to the community of the opportunities that are going to be available. We're seeing this huge paradigm shift to these clean energy technologies, and it's happening whether we like it or not, whether we're ready for it or not also. So we want to be proactive, and we want to make sure that there's an adequate workforce to be able to take on these jobs that we're anticipating are going to be coming to the region. And a lot of these jobs, they're going to be boots on the ground job. We want to be able to work with those who may not pursue a traditional 4-year or 2-year college degree. We want to identify individuals from these communities who are looking for that on-the-job training experience. We want to be able to get them into the workforce as quickly and efficiently as possible. And throughout that process, we might get them into the workforce through a certificate or an apprenticeship program, and then we can keep working with them to eventually get that 4-year degree or that 2-year degree or that advanced degree, as long as that degree exists. And that's going to be very important to getting this region where we need to be as far as improving our energy infrastructure. Pilot projects and community campaigns, I'll lump these two together, but we have allocated a large amount of funding to be able to actually go out and conduct some of these pilot projects and community campaigns throughout the region. We might be identifying communities of interest, specifically those that we've had developed these relationships with throughout the regional analysis portion. And we want to be able to go in there and provide some pilot projects. If they say that, a lot of our residents are interested in solar, we can go in, we can organize a solar, buy-in program where, we can get X amount of residents to subscribe to this program here, and then we can go in on bulk purchasing rates. We can do countless opportunities. And these pilot projects, these are going to be determined by that advisory committee. It's going to consist of our partners on the project, but also these members of the community that we're really leveraging their voices from. So when we started applying for this grant opportunity here, we had reached out, we did a lot of networking, we did our homework to figure out who in the region is currently engaged in some of this work, who is doing an exceptional job either engaging with the community, working with these different populations, if they are involved in the clean energy workforce there. And as we were interacting with some of these different groups there, one of the biggest questions we got was, who was Cooperative Extension to come in and do this work? And that was something where they're correct, especially here in Nassau County, we have not been traditionally involved in this clean energy work. We're not out there creating these jobs. We're not out there, doing this physical work. Our role is as educators. We come in, we work with the community, and that's certainly where our strength lies. Cooperative Extension is part of this larger statewide system. In each state throughout the nation, there's a land-grant university. For us in New York State, our land-grant university is Cornell University's College of Ag and Life Science. And within New York State, there are 62 county-based organizations that are all linked together within this larger network. This first bullet points here, it says that CCE, and when I say CCE, I mean Cornell Cooperative Extension, not the Center for Civic Engagement. We run into that issue with a few other organizations here also. But Cornell Cooperative Extension takes the resources from these faculty and professors and these researchers up at Cornell, and we disseminate it to the local community. Now that's true. I view cooperative extension as a two-way street. We're not only taking the information from the top and disseminating it throughout the community, our educators are out there working with these different audiences. They know exactly what the problems are. They know what issues they're facing. So we're then collecting that information and going back up to the university and saying, this is what you need to work on. These are the problems that our community is facing right now. And that's, in my opinion, more important than the information coming down, because now we're the ones guiding the research interests from the university. And throughout all of our programs, I mean, you can see how significant our impacts are. We have various program areas. We focus on nutrition and wellness. We have 4-H youth development. We have a number of different natural resource and environmental programs that we promote. We work with residents, we work with businesses, we work with everyone in between there. And we do have a lot of those established relationships. Cooperative Extension in Nassau County was established in 1914, so we have over 100 years of working in this community directly. A lot of the organizations that we work with currently, we've been working with for a number of years. We know the people, they know us, and they view us as a trusted source of information. So for us to get our foot in the door now with this new program that we're establishing here, they're going to trust us. They're going to be more likely to want to work with us because we've always provided for them in the past. So we see in this picture here on the top left-hand corner, this was actually recently Cornell Cooperative Extension did a big campaign up in Albany where we met with a lot of the politicians up there, to really tell them this is what Cooperative Extension is doing. We are a quasi-governmental organization, which means that we are established through legislation. We operate as our own nonprofit organization, but we do receive state and county funding to support our operations. So it's important that the politicians and those who are signing our paychecks know what type of work we are doing out in the community. Some of these other pictures here just demonstrate, the different audience members that we work with. This picture here in the bottom right-hand corner, this was from one of our gardening programs. We worked with residents in traditionally low to moderate income neighborhoods, and we taught a gardening program geared specifically to individuals who are interested in supplementing their food budget. So, low to moderate income households who don't have the resources to buy food to be able to supplement some of their SNAP benefits or other incentives that they receive, and really empower them with the confidence to be able to take the matter into their own hands to develop their own solution. And with this, we can't do it alone. So in developing this program here, we had collaborated with a number of organizations who have different strengths in different areas. We are working with Cornell Cooperative Extension in Suffolk County as our counterpart, who do very similar work that we do here in Nassau County. Hofstra University is one of our major partners. Hofstra will be, as I mentioned, employing one of the community energy advisors who will be going out into the community and connecting with the different programs, connecting the resources from the Center for Civic Engagement to these energy programs that we're going to be promoting. Hofstra is also going to be assisting with the regional analysis and barriers assessment as a leader in the social sciences, being able to take all that data that we're collecting from the community, both quantitative and qualitative, and be able to summarize it together into a report. So that way, when we go back to the community, we say, these are our findings, these are our recommendations, this is what we're going to do. We have the Malloy University Sustainability Institute who's been a leader in the Clean Energy Communities program, specifically working with a lot of commercial building operators and larger scale renewables. Renewable Energy Long Island, or RELI, they're based on the East End out of East Hampton. They have been a leader in this area and have done a lot of community campaigns as well. They've been doing some campaigns out in East Hampton to promote solar throughout all these residential neighborhoods, and that strength in their community campaigns is what they're going to be contributing to our partnership here as well. And then United Way of Long Island, aside from just being a resource to the community, they are also a strong partner in our workforce development programs also. They have their Youth Build program and they have their E3 Training Center, which is actually a mock home where they provide on-the-job training to be able to demonstrate all these different practices, to be able to teach people exactly how to install some of these clean energy technologies, how to weatherize a home, and all that stuff that we're looking to do throughout this project here. And then aside from our subcontracted organizations, I'd say we have over 150 other grassroots organizations that we're working with throughout the community to be able to disseminate some of this local information, to introduce us to their audiences, and ensure that we have the support from the community to move forward with this project. So, I mean, opportunities for students to be able to engage with the hub, there are a ton of them out there. As we described, we have a lot of different moving pieces to this project, and there's going to be a lot of opportunities coming up. I think one of the biggest things here are some of these community campaigns, being able to contribute ideas from fresh set of minds and being able to go out into the communities and help promote some of these campaigns is going to be a key piece of this program. We also have our Energy Navigators volunteer program. We're training volunteers from the community to go out and expand our outreach from this program, to work hand in hand with our energy advisors to be able to increase the number of people that we're working with. The Energy Navigator volunteers may not be providing the level of assistance that our energy advisors would be doing. However, they're going out into the local community and they're saying, hey, these resources exist. And they're pointing people into the direction of our energy advisors who could then provide them with the support. And that's going to be a very important component of this project here. So once again, here's my contact information. As we continue to move forward with this project and build upon our relationships with Hofstra here, I'm sure that your professors will relay some of this information and continue to identify ways for students to get involved in this. So thank you.
Can we please raise the screen and we'll all come sit up on the dais? Can you raise the screen, please? Thank you. I have some questions I'm going to put to our panelists, but if you all have questions, don't be shy. Come up to the mic. I ask you to come up to the mic because this is being recorded, and it's the only way we'll record your voice is if you use the microphone. So anyway, don't be shy.
It's coming to a theater near you.
Is this? Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me up there? Good. Oh, do you have a question?
I have a question, yeah. This question is for Michael, and I very much applaud the efforts that the state is doing to increase energy efficiency. What I'm concerned with, though, is that I don't see any effort to cut down overall consumption, which ultimately is leading us to the problem of the climate. And what I'm suggesting is that it's not just through efficiency that we might want to deal with the issue, but are there any efforts made to cut overall consumption? For example, suppose we were to have a pricing system that would charge a great deal more for consuming energy beyond, say, the median level. And in that way, you might cut back on overall consumption other than what I applaud, namely the efficiency efforts.
Can you hear me in this mic? So I guess my response to that is no one likes Uncle Sam in their house. So, to be able to enforce, something, that would encourage people to reduce their energy consumption would be difficult. Our approach to that is through our educational programs and educating people on how they can cut down on their energy usage. And through that, we can see that installing more higher efficiency appliances, weatherizing the home so that your heating systems aren't running as often, and generally educating them more. You had mentioned the cost to operate the energy past a certain threshold. The Long Island Power Authority recently passed through their board the time of day energy rates, which just like the Long Island Railroad would charge you more when energy consumption is at the highest rate. So we'll have peak and off-peak energy rates fairly soon. And this means that at between 4 and 7 p.m., when energy usage is the highest, that's when we'll see a higher peak cost. At night from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., we'll see reduced rates when energy usage is the lowest. And that would help us encourage people to really just be more mindful of when they're using energy. And throughout that model, they may become more aware of how their energy is being used and how they can cut back on their energy consumption overall.
Can I follow up with a statement? Namely, it's one thing to bring about a better use in terms of time, as you're suggesting, with peak rates. But what I'm concerned with is that we're using too much energy overall. And so if we want to deal with the climate issue and many other issues, it's important to, I think, cut back in overall energy usage. And I do applaud efficiency measures, but beyond that, what I'm thinking is
so where would you
use the price system, charge a whole lot more for people who use excessive amounts of energy, even though they may use it efficiently.
So I absolutely agree with you that we need to use less energy when we can. I think I disagree with the implication that economy measures do not put a significant dent. If we were to deal with the waste that people that we see through the lack of weatherization, I think you would see a significant difference. My problem with putting the onus on the individual, the consumer, a homeowner, who are already paying the highest utility costs in the nation, quite literally, and who are also paying some of the highest property taxes, to add more of a burden on them may not be politically or socially efficient, and stop cold and hurt your efforts to popularize the kinds of programs you want. So, if you want to tax somebody, and this would be a form of a tax, go after the makers of appliances, go after deeper pockets. That's what I would suggest. I said, telling somebody, in a neighborhood next door to us, who are already facing all the burdens that I talked about in the beginning, the disparities that they have to deal with, and not getting basically as much bang for the bucks that they spend to be citizens as, the folks in Hempstead, as in where I live in Rockville Center, to add another burden. I'm not so sure that
it wouldn't affect us.
That's the way to go.
What I'm suggesting is the price system should be effective of people who use excessive amounts of energy.
that is,
when we're talking about Hempstead or Uniondale, they probably use a lot less energy than people in Garden City or Manhasset or Rockville Center or wherever.
fine, man. Your point addresses a different solution than the one that was outlined now. And that might be a question for the legislature, but for the folks tasked with executing the grant as it was written, I think we should be asking where and how and why this would be effective instead of fundamentally why it won't be, if we do in fact believe it won't be.
It's certainly something worth bouncing off the community, but I think that they'll start throwing stuff and bouncing it off of me if I talked about wanting to increase their energy costs when they don't have the tools to reduce it significantly. You know, until there's information that out there that they can use, and tools, even physical tools that they can have access to, putting an added burden on a homeowner who's already facing the high taxes and the lack of services, I wouldn't go down that road. But I'm with you in spirit. I have to tell you that. You know that.
I have a question, and just let me remind our audience, please come up and ask your questions if you have some. But a lot of what you described, Michael, addresses a knowledge gap, maybe an awareness of what resources are available. Since we're talking about focusing on communities that are often underserved, maybe by the utilities or by government, how do you close the gap between knowledge and the affordability of, say, putting in heat pumps or putting in more efficient systems?
I think those two tie hand in hand. You know, once people become more aware that these opportunities exist, then we can provide more different educational tools to show them the cost benefits of installing these systems here. We can show them exactly what the out-of-pocket costs are going to be, and we can show them, you know, how that financing system works. You know, just like a banker would explain how a loan works, you know, we'd be able to walk them through that process to help them, you know, overcome that barrier and make it seem less intimidating to them. But unfortunately, you know, we can't control the cost of these systems, you know, but through education, we can we can significantly work to, you know, encourage more residents to adopt some of these systems and feel more comfortable in doing so.
But other than the, say, incentives for solar that are already out there, is there anything built into this that would help subsidize the cost of some of these systems?
So that's where some of our community campaigns and pilot projects come into hand here. We do have some funding set aside throughout the project to be able to provide some cost benefits to communities who are interested in pursuing some of these projects. Throughout this network here, I think it's important to acknowledge that NYSERDA is not the only one who is contributing financially to these solutions here. We do have a number of other organizations and municipalities who do have rebate programs and financial incentives for anyone who's interested in pursuing these opportunities, regardless of your household income.
Okay. If we subsidize some of these systems, and we're working in, say, lower socioeconomic status communities, and we know in those communities more people rent than own, or there's a higher likelihood of renting versus owning, what is the incentive for the person occupying the home to upgrade those systems? Or is there an incentive for a landlord to do so if the person living there is the one paying the utility?
Our multifamily building owners are going to be one of the more difficult audiences to reach. And that's where being able to outline the financial benefits of these opportunities is really going to be important here. Because they may be receiving, you know, rent from their tenants there, and that may be covering all their costs there. However, if they can offer their tenants more affordable rates, then they'll be able to keep them happy. But it's not always just about the money. You know, if we're able to work with these multifamily building owners and encourage them to adopt these technologies for non-financial reasons, for the environmental benefits, for the sustainability of our grid here, then that's another type of education that we need to be doing throughout the community.
Something you want to add? Oh, no, I'm good. I'm okay.
And it would improve the value of the property too, right? These kinds of energy improvements make the value of the property higher, so that might be a selling point.
Of course.
In fact, it's a reminder that we really need to reach out to landlords, because in a lot of the more underserved communities, folks are renters. They live in multifamily homes, and and they have no ability. They can't even legally do anything to their domicile. So we have to probably think of ways of identifying people who own multiple properties, and find ways to say, hey, you know, this is not only a nice thing and the right thing for you to do, but it's a smart thing in terms of the value, as you mentioned, the value of the home. It just occurred to me that we hadn't had that conversation. It's a good idea.
Of course, and there are still some smaller things that tenants can do if they are renting a home to be able to improve their home energy efficiency. You know, they may see those benefits more directly if they are paying their utilities and not necessarily having that lumped into their,
Right.
you know, monthly rent that they're paying there. But that goes back to the energy consumption. That goes back to the efficiency of the appliances, and just being mindful and intentional about when and how we are using our energy resources.
Does this program address charging stations for cars?
Not directly. The scope of this project is specifically with residential homeowners, multifamily building owners, and some small scale businesses. Through the community campaigns, electric vehicles will tie in a little bit, specifically when we're looking at you know, the locations and the opportunities to charge these electric vehicles. If the household is retrofitted to be able to plug in an electrical vehicle at night, or if the EV operator needs to travel to an off-site location to be able to charge their vehicle. So we'll be looking at all of that stuff that will be included in our regional analysis and barriers assessment to see, you know, if any of those barriers contribute to the success of the project.
Okay. Can you also, or any of you, speak to this, that is, as homes become more efficient, you have reduced demand for certain forms of energy, which would then drive up the cost, would it not? Would that eventually be an added burden of living in a lower socioeconomic community? Does that question make sense?
If you could repeat that again, what I think I understand is as more people begin to take advantage of some of these renewable energy resources, will that have any negative benefits to the communities that are not participating?
Yes.
I would say no, because what we're not doing is we're not limiting the energy resources that are available. We're simply replacing them. As we strive to meet the climate goals through the Climate Leadership and Protection Act, we will begin to phase out some of our traditional fossil fuels and begin to replace those with renewable energy sources, either through solar or offshore wind energy. So it's not a matter of restricting or limiting the amount of energy that's available. It's simply replacing it with a more sustainable option.
Okay. This is my last question. How do you plan on measuring your success? What would be an indicator that you've succeeded or not?
Our major indicator of success is going to be the number of customers that we could work with to be able to take advantage of the financial incentives. We already have baseline numbers for what these redemption rates currently are throughout the region. We want to be looking at the ratio of how many individuals our community energy advisors contact to how many of those individuals actually become customers. So if we are at an event and we interact with 100 people, if 10 of those people then take us up on our offer to work with them, we're going to see that as a success. And we'll be measuring that throughout the entire region. And that's specifically just on the energy advising side. when we're looking at the workforce development and some of the other opportunities that are out there, I think some of those, success indicators are yet to be established, because we don't know yet what the current workforce redemption rate is going to be. We're still working to identify what some of those pathways are, especially as a lot of these jobs that are coming up quickly are relatively new. We haven't had a lot of these jobs, 10 years ago. So that's going to have to be established throughout the length of this project here. And I anticipate that they would constantly evolve, throughout the course.
Some of this is going to be trying to quantify the qualitative. I mean, for me, in addition to the measurable metrics, there's almost an awe factor. If after 4 years, it's widely accepted by the political class, by community members, including faith-based organizations, existing groups that have been around for a long, long time, that this has been an effective program, that they're hearing from their people that this is something that's worth participating in. And then the political class hears that and makes this permanent. Like right now, this is, correct me, maybe I'm using the wrong words, but it's a pilot program. We have 4 years, 3.5 years to show that this is worth doing and to learn how to do it in a way that will make it worth doing for government on one side and the money they're putting into it, and the community on the other side. And I'm hoping that whatever we do, however it's measured, quantitatively or qualitatively, it will be recognized that the way that the state, the way we're going about our business, which is to engage the community, to connect people who often aren't connected if you just let things proceed the way they always have. The disconnect that's race-based and income-based, that this is recognized as a way of bridging those gaps, that to me would be a success.
Very good. Well, if there are no other questions out there, unless there are, we will wrap up and thank our guests. Thank you very much for sharing this with us today.
Yeah, thank you.
And best of luck. And I look forward to working with you with CCE. Take care.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for coming, guys.
We filled the whole time. We filled the whole slot. I got to cook dinner.
Now I understand.
More than the other. Is there anything you could do to make sure that you incentivize the retailer?
Well, that's the distribution.
You get a star rebate.
But they're not even displayed. You go there and they don't, they show you a whole bunch of refrigerators, but they don't show you. They don't even